Hello. Um, so welcome and thank you for coming out and showing your support for this special night. Kathy Jetnil-Kijiner came to my attention, as well as much of the world's, in 2014 when she spoke during the opening ceremony of the UN Secretary General's Climate Summit. But as I was dealing with being a mom to a 2-year-old and twins, I will admit that I didn't give her the attention that she deserved at the time. But when I returned to teaching full-time in 2017, I wanted to incorporate more of Marshall Islands history and culture and current events into my classes. So I rediscovered Ms. Jetnil-Kijiner's 2014 address to the UN. And I was so moved by it, especially as I had been living here in the Marshalls for 11 years by that point, and I had seen some of the things she's talking about climate change actually happen over those 11 years, tides getting higher. So I just started keeping track of when she would release new videos and things like that, and so I could use it in my classes. And so over the years, I've used them and watched or listened to some of her same spoken word pieces for each new groups of students that I've taught. And even though I'm so familiar with them, I still find myself moved by them. Sometimes tearing up, sometimes getting goosebumps, sometimes both. And it's given me hope to watch my students also be affected by her poetry and her presentation of it. The arts can make an emotional impact that just reading the facts on paper or on a web page cannot. And that emotion is so powerful. It can resonate in a person and can lead them to want to learn more and to share their knowledge and to take action. Ms. Jetnil-Kijiner also founded, and she'll talk about this, founded Jojikum, which is a nonprofit organization that focuses on creating community-based programs to empower Marshallese youth through training in media, arts, and project management in relation to climate change. So she's been inspiring students throughout the Marshalls, but especially, she's been inspired, I've seen her work inspire Kwaj students. Some of them have written poetry, some of them have spoken at international events, some have created social media campaigns, and more. Sometimes this has happened from afar, sometimes in person on Madro, because we've had KJH student go to the summer camp. And this week it'll be at our Kwajalein Junior Senior High School on Friday. I am so grateful for Kathy's serving as a role model for our young Marshallese women and men. To look up to and to see someone that looks like them, and to see that you can live and be from a small island nation and still make a big impact. And so I am honored to introduce her, and please join me in welcoming Ms. Kathy Jetnil-Kijiner.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to hear me speak and just share some poetry. I really appreciate you all coming out on a Wednesday night. So I actually have not performed for a really long time. I haven't been performing. I was performing full-time for about 3 years, but then I shifted my focus and I've started working as a climate envoy with the Ministry of Environment in our government, and focusing on running the nonprofit. So, but when Pam messaged me and said, would you consider coming out here? I couldn't pass it up because I'm curious about this island and about this base and about Ibay, and I've been wanting to come out here for a long time. So I'm really grateful for the organizers and for Pam and everyone who helped support bringing me out here. I know how much work it is to coordinate those kinds of logistics. I guess I'm just going to share just a few poems today, and then I tend to be better at Q&A, so I hope you'll be open to sharing your questions with me, whatever they may be, on poetry or on my work in the climate sector, and my work with students as well. I'm open to discussing any of that. So I started writing poetry when I was in the 4th grade, and then I started writing poetry, started studying poetry in when I actually got my creative writing degree from Mills College in Oakland, California, and then I started writing poems then. And when I returned back to the Marshall Islands after I graduated from school, that's when I was confronted with climate change for the first time, and that's when I started writing about it. So I don't just write about climate change, though. I also write about the nuclear testing legacy, racism against Micronesians in Hawaii, and my own experiences growing up, my relationships with my family. This book that I'm reading, these poems that I'm reading to you to all tonight is like pretty old. They're like maybe 7, 8, 10 years old. But they still resonate with me to today, and they have a place in the work that I do. I really believe in the power of poetry to raise awareness on issues, to connect to these issues. And I think when I first started out, I didn't want to be known as the climate change poet, but it actually ended up. I realized that there's so many ways to look at climate change. There's so many ways and stories to tell about this issue. And so I just kind of, as I continue to learn about climate change as an issue, the poetry continues to sort of reflect that journey. And so I have some newer pieces too, if there's time. We might get into that as well. But I think for tonight, I'm going to just kind of take you through the earliest poem I ever wrote about climate change, which is Tell Them. And then through the UN poem, and then the latest poem video that I had released, the last big poem video that I had released called Rise. So, yeah. I wonder if I should say anything else. I was raised in Hawaii. Did I say that already? And I got my bachelor's in Mills College, my master's from University of Hawaii in Manoa, and I'm currently a PhD student with the Australian National University. So I guess that's the other things that I do. And I have my daughter who's 8 years old now, and she goes to school in Medjugorje. I've been based in Medjugorje for the past 2 years. Before COVID, I chose to move there, and then it got shut down. I was like, oh well, this works anyways. And so she's still going to school there. And yeah, I think that kind of catches us up a bit. So maybe we can get into it a bit more in a little while. Sorry? Oh, right. So some background on me. The islands, I'm actually the daughter of Jetnil-Kijiner and Thomas Kitchenot Jr. Jetnil-Kijiner is the former president of the Marshall Islands. She was the first female Pacific Islander leader of a nation, and also the first and still only PhD holder in the country who's Marshallese. So she's definitely been an inspiration and a guidance in the work that I do, and that probably plays into my career in some way, that what she's done, definitely. Okay, so let me look for the piece. Okay. And this is the first book I ever published. And yeah, this is the first book of poetry published by a Marshallese outside of the Marshall Islands. And it's called Yip Jeldok Poems from a Marshallese Daughter, and you can order it on University of Amazon's website. It's published by University of University of Arizona. Amazon's not a university. But you can also get it at the University of Amazon, which is Amazon. Yeah. So, but you can purchase it at either of those websites. So, this first poem is called "Tell Them," and it was written when I first moved back home to the Marshall Islands, and again after college and being raised out in Hawaii, and I witnessed a king tide flooding. So when there was a high tide flooding, all this water rushed out in front of our house, and I asked my mom, "Is this normal?" And she said, no, she'd never seen anything like it. As she was Minister of Education at the time, and she had to evacuate a bunch of students. She had to bring a lot of relocate families into the schools so that they could have some place to stay. And it really left an impression on me on how vulnerable we were. And I forgot how big the ocean is out here until you move out here, you know. And then I did research, and I noticed that all the journalists and articles that they wrote about climate change in the Marshall Islands just assumed that we needed to give up and leave. Like, they were like, these people will have to leave. These people will become refugees. These people will, this is going to happen. And there was no discussion. There was no Marshallese voices highlighted in those articles. There was no Marshallese perspectives. And it was like a finality to the ways in which that they discussed the issue. Like, it's going to happen, and, you know, they have no choice in the matter. So I didn't like that. And so this poem came out of that, and it came out of thinking about what I want people to know about the Marshall Islands. Okay. I prepared the package for my friends in the States. First, the dangling earrings, woven into half moons, black pearls glinting like an eye in a storm of tight spirals. Second, the baskets, sturdy, also woven, brown, cowrie shells shiny, intricate mandala shaped by calloused fingers. Inside the basket, I write a message. Wear these earrings to parties, to classes and meetings, to the corner store, the grocery store, and while riding the bus. Store jewelry, incense, copper coins, and curling letters like this one in this basket. And when others ask you where you got this, you tell them they're from the Marshall Islands. Show them where it is on a map. Tell them we are a proud people toasted dark brown as the carved ribs of a tree stump. Tell them we are descendants of the finest navigators in the world. Tell them our islands were dropped from a basket carried by a giant. Tell them we are the hollow hulls of canoes as fast as the wind slicing through the Pacific Sea. We are wood shavings and drying pandanus leaves and siquipueros at KMMs. Tell them we are the sweet harmonies of mothers, aunties, sisters, songs late into night. The whispered prayer of God, a crown of fuchsia flowers encircling Auntie Mere's white seafoam hair. Tell them we are styrofoam cups of Kool-Aid red waiting patiently for the illuminage. Tell them we are dusty rubber slippers stolen from concrete doorsteps. We are the ripped seams and the broken door handles of taxis. We are sweaty handshaking and other sweaty hand in heat. Tell them we are days and nights hotter than anything you can imagine. Tell them we are little girls with braids cartwheeling beneath the rain. We are shards of broken beer bottles burrowed beneath fine white sand. We are children flinging like rubber bands across a road clogged with chugging cars. Tell them we only have one road. And after all this, tell them about the water, how we have seen it rising, flooding across our cemeteries, gushing over our seawalls, and crashing against our homes. Tell them what it's like to see the entire ocean level with the land. Tell them we are afraid. Tell them we don't know of the politics or the science, but we see what's in our own backyard. Tell them some of us are old fishermen who believe that God made us a promise. Tell them some of us are a little bit more skeptical. But most importantly, you tell them that we don't want to leave, that we've never wanted to leave, and that we are nothing without our islands. Thank you. So that was the first poem I wrote and put on YouTube. And I think it was kind of a really weird thing to do at the time. People were like, what do we do with this? Why is she doing this? Especially my own family. They were like, we don't get what you're doing. We don't understand why you're doing this. But then, it was good that I did because the U.S. ambassador at the time saw the poem video. And then he nominated me to be a civil society representative at the United Nations Climate Summit in 2014. And at the time, I didn't really know what it was. They were like, we want to nominate you for this thing. And I was rushing out, and I had my baby, and I was teaching, after from the first time. And I was like, sure, okay, sounds good. And I didn't really think about it. And then later they were like, you've been shortlisted, you're one of them, can you send us a video about why you should be chosen? So I did that, and then I got a call in the middle of teaching that I was actually, I know, what kind teacher. I stepped out and took a call. And then I found out, I was selected, and it was really cool. I got to go back into the classroom with my students and be like, guys, something really cool just happened. So, so I was selected to speak at this climate summit, and they said, look, we've seen you do these poem videos. Can you write a poem for this opening of the summit? And it was in 2 weeks. And they're like, we need you to write a poem that will save the world. And which I was like, tall order, buddy. That's probably not going to happen. But, there was a whole committee that gave me feedback on what to write about, what kinds of issues I could cover. And then they were like, you have to perform for, all these world leaders. So finally, I was like, okay, I don't know how to do any of that. I don't know how to speak to world leaders. I don't know how to speak to, all these people at this summit. But I had just had my daughter, and I thought I can write to her. It can be a letter to her. So what came out of that was actually one of my most hopeful pieces that, really showed, because, you're talking to a baby, you're not going to yell at a baby. So the poem is actually one of my most like gentle, loving, hopeful pieces that I'd ever written. And it was terrifying, but I survived. Giving birth was still scarier. So ultimately it was okay. So this is the piece that I ended up writing. Her name is Matafele Benum Kathy Makirusa. Matafele is her father's side, who's Samoan, and Benum is the name of the land that my family comes from in Jeloid, one of the other atolls here. So it was important to me that both of her islands were represented in the piece. So there was a poem video that they created that played in the background, and I'm going to play it right now. Hopefully the sound is okay. If anything, we can always redo it. We're all friends here, so we can. Dear Matafele Benum, you are a 7-month-old sunrise of gummy smiles. You are bald as an egg and bald as a Buddha. You are thighs that are thunder, shrieks that are lightning, so excited for bananas, hugs, and our morning walks along the lagoon. Dear Matafele Benum, I want to tell you about that lagoon, that lucid, sleepy lagoon lounging against the sunrise. Men say that one day, that lagoon will devour you. They say it will gnaw at the shoreline, chew at the roots of your breadfruit trees, gulp down rows of seawalls, and crunch through your island's shattered bones. They say you, your daughter, and your granddaughter too will wander, rootless, with only a passport to call home. Dear Matafele Benum, don't cry. Mommy promises you, no one will come and devour you. No greedy whale of a company sharking through political seas, no backwater bullying of businesses with broken morals, no blindfolded bureaucracy. Gonna push this mother ocean over the edge. No one's drowning, baby. No one's moving. No one's losing their homeland. No one's gonna become a climate change refugee. Or should I say, no one else. To the Carteret Islanders of Papua New Guinea and to the Taro Islanders of the Solomon Islands, I take this moment to apologize. We are drawing the line here. Because, baby, we are going to fight. Your mommy, daddy, Bubuchima, your country, and your president too, we will all fight. And even though there are those hidden behind platinum titles who like to pretend that we don't exist, who like to pretend that the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Maldives, Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, the floods of Algeria, Colombia, and Pakistan, and all the earthquakes and hurricanes and the tidal waves didn't exist? Still, there are those who see us, hands reaching out, fists raising up, banners unfurling, megaphones booming, and we are canoes blocking coal ships. We are the radiance of solar villages. We are the fresh, clean soil of the farmer's past. We are petitions blooming from teenage fingertips. We are families biking, recycling, reusing, engineers dreaming, designing, building, artists painting, dancing, writing, and we are spreading the word. And there are thousands out on the street marching hand in hand, chanting for change now, and they're marching for you, baby. They're marching for us because we deserve to do more than just survive. We deserve to thrive. Dear Matafele Benum, you are eyes heavy with drowsy weight. So just close those eyes and sleep in peace because we won't let you down. You'll see. So it was received well at the UN. I think it went well. We survived. So it ended up changing my career, that piece. I ended up getting invited to more and more conferences on climate change, where I was exposed to more and more conversations around climate change and international audiences, and more opportunities to speak on the issues. So as I continued to kind of get into that world, I kept writing poetry that reflected what I was doing. And so I'm not going to read all the poems that I've written on climate change, but it really shows as you kind of track it, like the development of my own understanding of this issue and how I relate to it. So the last poem that I was going to show is actually just a video. Some of you might have seen it already, but it was one of my last big projects. It was actually a bookend. It was actually two projects. There was one that was on the nuclear testing on Eniwetok, so I performed it from the Runit Dome. I actually took a canoe all the way out to Eniwetok, worked with the people there, and then I also went to Bigini, and I filmed over there too and performed the piece from the dome. While there in Bigini, I picked some shells and I took it with me. And then after that, I guess I should backtrack. Before that, I had gone to a conference, a Rhodes Scholar conference in London, and I met the founder of an organization called 350.org, and it's a climate change organizing organization. And the founder saw me perform, and afterwards he was like, I think it'd be really cool to shoot you on like a glacier, on like an ice, like on ice. What do you think? And I was like, yeah, I'm down. Let's do it. So we did it. It was actually really cool. So the second poem video that came out after that one was called Anointed was Rise. So this was a poem video that came out of that idea of just like, let's just do it. So 350.org helped fund the piece, and it was supporting one of their campaigns, which was called Rise, coincidentally. And then I wanted to basically connect the melting ice in Greenland to what was the rising sea level here. So initially it would have just been me like taking this journey to Greenland, but I didn't feel right going to Greenland. It's someone else's land without having someone from there with me. So I reached out to the scientist who was taking us around at the time, and I asked him, do you know any Greenlandic artists, indigenous Greenlandic artists? And so he connected me with Akaniviana. Akaniviana is a young Greenlandic poet who's also an activist like me, and we met over Facebook Messenger, and I was actually performing for the Vatican at the time, and that's when I first connected with her. And then we met for the first time in Greenland, and we clicked right away. It was so serendipitous. And so we created this poem that was meant to be like this connection to one another, this call to one another. And it's all about connecting our lands and how climate change is impacting us. So yeah, this is the piece. Sister of ice and snow, I'm coming to you from the land of my ancestors, from atolls, sunken volcanoes, undersea descent of sleeping giants.
Sister of ocean and sand, I welcome you to the land of my ancestors, to the land where they sacrificed their lives to make mine possible, to the land of survivors.
I'm coming to you from the land my ancestors chose. Jetnil-Kijiner, Marshall Islands, a country more sea than land.
I welcome you to Kwajalein, Greenland, the biggest island on Earth.
With me I bring these shells that I picked from the shores of Bigini Atoll and Runit Dome.
In my hand I hold these rocks, picked from the shores of Nuuk, the foundation of the land I call my home.
With these shells I bring with me a story of long ago. Two sisters frozen in time on the island of Kwajalein. One magically turned to stone, the other who chose that life to be rooted by her sister's side. To this day, the two sisters can be seen by the edge of the reef, a lesson in permanence.
With these rocks I bring a story told countless times, a story about Sesuma Amna, mother of the sea, who lives in a cave at the bottom of the ocean. This is a story about the guardian of the sea. She sees the greed in our hearts, the disrespect in our eyes. Every whale, every stream, every iceberg are her children. When we disrespect them, she gives us what we deserve, a lesson in respect. Do we deserve the melting ice, the hungry polar bears coming to our islands, or the colossal icebergs hitting these waters with rage? From one island to another,
I ask for solutions, from one island to another.
I ask for your problems.
Let me show you the tide, coming for us faster than we'd like to admit. Let me show you airports underwater, bulldozed reefs, blasted sands, and plans to build new atolls, forcing land from an ancient rising sea, forcing us to imagine turning ourselves to stone.
Can you see our glaciers grown with the weight of the world's heat? I wait for you, here on the land of my ancestors, heart heavy with a continuous thirst for solutions. As I watch this land change while the world remains silent.
Sister of ice and snow, I come to you now, in grief.
Mourning landscapes that are always forced to change. First, through wars inflicted on us.
Then through nuclear waste dumped in our waters.
On our ice.
And now,
this. Sister of ocean and sand, I offer you these rocks, the foundation of my home. May the same unshakable foundation connect us, make us stronger than these colonizing monsters that still to this day devour our lives. The very same beasts that now decide who should live,
who should die. Sister of ice and snow, I offer you these shells and the story of the two sisters as testament, as declaration that despite what we are told, we will not leave. We will choose stone. We will choose to be rooted to this reef forever. From these islands,
we ask for solutions.
From these islands,
we ask, we demand that the world see beyond
ACs, SUVs, their pre-packaged convenience, their oil-slick dreams.
Beyond the belief that tomorrow will never happen, that this is merely an inconvenient truth.
Let me bring my home to yours.
Let's watch as Miami, New York, Shanghai, Amsterdam, London, Rio de Janeiro, and Osaka try to breathe underwater. You think you have decades before your home fall beneath tides?
We have years, we have months before you sacrifice us again, before you watch from your TV screens and computer screens to see if we will still be breathing while you do nothing.
My sister, I offer you these rocks as a reminder that our lives matter more than their power. That life in all form demands the same respect we all give to money.
That these issues will affect each and every one of us. None of us is immune.
And that each and every one of us has to decide if we will rise.
Kalibatin ko sa aking sulsunin, inoksang ampun daguni ko si masanun ilumut soksu inunaming kamaning Tumulo amang kakusiso.
I forgot how long that poem video is. I was like, whoa, it's long. Yeah, so that's the latest poem video, and we were really happy with how it ended. I know it focused a lot on this exchange of the rocks and the shells. It was based on the ritual of visiting islands that we do here. You know, when you visit a community, you don't come empty-handed. You always have gifts to exchange. And so that was our real exchange. I actually gave her those shells, and she actually gave me those stones. So it was also creating kind of our own ritual. So that's the last. Well, I did another poem video after that, but and then there's other poems that I've been working on. But otherwise, most of my work has been focused on the nonprofit sector, on organizing youth and creating programs for them and surviving as a nonprofit, which is pretty difficult in the Marshalls. And then also helping our national government with our international strategizing on climate change. So attending the Conference of the Parties, which is the annual conference on climate change, helping with the negotiations and supporting that, and just kind of strategizing across the different region and the work that we do. So right now, the country's focus is on building the National Adaptation Plan. So I actually reference in that poem about, we're about to bulldoze reefs just to be able to survive. So what I was referencing is the fact that the Marshall Islands is now recognizing that the rising sea level isn't going to change anytime soon. The country isn't making the world isn't making the changes fast enough that we need. And so we're turning to adaptation, which is literally changing the physical landscape of our islands to be able to stay here and maintain our sovereignty. So that looks like elevating parts of land, building islands even. And so we're considering these really extreme solutions, what we call adaptation pathways. And so that plan is what we call our survival plan. And that's what we're finishing up this year and bringing out to COP. And that's going to help our government plan in the years ahead as climate change continues. So that's mostly what I've been focusing on as well. Yeah. And then I think, I'll just stop there. So I think I'll just get into if there's any questions. Maybe I'll open it up. If there's any specific questions that anybody has, I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I can also just read another poem, but otherwise we could just go into questions. I'm totally fine with that. I'm easy, so what's up to you guys? What? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I don't know what to do as far as poems goes. Okay, so there's I guess I could read this newer piece. Since there's grown-ups here, I might do something that's a bit more, plays a bit more with craft. So this is a newer piece that I wrote. It was for an art installation, so I do art installations too. And it was it was on whales. The woman I was collaborating with wanted to focus on whales and how whales are impacted by sonar in Hawaii. And so I was like, man, I don't really think about whales very much. So I had to think about it for a minute, like, what do I write about whales? So this is sort of about that, but it's also about the difficulties of these kinds of negotiations at the conference, at the international level of being a brown person from a small island in these spaces. And something to note is that I learned before I wrote this poem that the 3 words that are in the Paris Treaty that are like the weakest words to have is decides, urges, and requests. Like this, we decides that the countries will commit to lowering their emissions or whatever. That's obviously not what it says, but it's those 3 words. So I incorporated that into the piece and then tried to figure out how in the world to write about whales. So this is the piece that came out. It's called Beached. And if the documents are true, then even the whalers avoided us. They slid past these islands, whittled without rivers from gods living in shallow trunks of knee. Whales were hunted for the simplest pleasure, a light and meat. Greenlandic hands offer me whale the same way I am offered turtle back home, in tradition, in ceremony. How conquerors stripped the sacred, left a soured carcass of commodity. Simple pleasures plundered and masticated. Destruction takes many forms. Persistent floods besiege us from all sides, even here in this meeting. We cross and crisscross an ocean of documents meant to charter an unfiltered future. Destruction takes the form of bolded words, decides, urges, requests. 3 abysmal sounding lines for compassion. In August, whales die in Maui without Hawaiian hands to soothe them into soft darkness. If it was a Marshallese shoreline, the beached whales would signal a chiefly death, harbingers of loss and damage, cost analysis of disemboweled paperwork. How do we decide the proper response to a room full of sharks in suits? They can smell the brown in our blood, the native in our speech. They offer thickets of false solutions, strategies without navigational aids. I spent the meeting searching for the simplest pleasures, a light to guide the thin meat of my paper heart. I could interpret movements less than enemies on all sides. Over and over, I asked to decide your position. I urged you to reassess your motivations. I stood naked as a shoreline, requesting the simplest pleasures. I guess that's kind of a weird piece, but yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay, maybe I shall stop there. Right. Questions? Anybody have questions? I am super open to questions. Yeah, so actually I write mostly in English because I am trying to reach audiences, members outside of the Marshall Islands. But there is one poem that's in Marshallese, but it's actually about my struggles with learning Kwajalein. And so that one has it in Marshallese, yeah. And then I have Marshallese words peppered throughout and Marshallese phrases that, can't be translated, those kinds of things, yeah. Good question, thank you. Any other questions? No. Oh, yes. So I really liked poetry a lot. I don't know why. It came out really naturally for me. I was telling the third and fourth graders I worked with today that my first poem was when I was in fourth grade. And it was about an invisible elephant, very important issues of the day. So I just kept writing throughout my childhood. Just poems would just come out, little poems, and it helped me understand the world around me. And then I learned when I got to college that poetry could reflect social justice issues. I was a part of something called Poetry for the People program in college, and I learned about, Black authors, Mexican authors, Chicano authors, and how they reflected the issues and concerns of their community. And I was like, what are the issues and concerns of my community? And then I just began focusing on that. And so I saw poetry as a vehicle for social change. Performance is something that I didn't expect to like, and I still kind of don't like. You guys are a lovely audience, but I tend to be actually a bit introverted. But I for some reason it's different than reading a poem. People always say you reading your poem is so different than me reading your poem on the page. So I try to bring that into the performances and the work that I do as well. Yeah. So I think it's just because it was fun. Long story short, yeah, I like it. Any other questions? Yes. Yes, I was so nervous to speak at the UN conference. I didn't sleep the night before. I barely slept the week before. I remember being at the cash register in Medjugorje and forgetting my PIN and just standing there blankly, and because I was still so afraid all the way up to the time I had to leave. So I was terrified. Yeah, and I mean, it's huge. The space itself is very large. So yeah, I was very afraid. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Yeah, so I have actually, so when I was performing full time, I unfortunately had to travel a lot. And so I had to explain to her, mommy has to go. And I sort of used Moana as a way to explain it. I'm not Moana. Please don't, yeah. I wasn't trying to say I'm Moana, but I was trying to say something is happening to our island and I have to go and find help like how Moana did. There's all this water coming. And she was, I think, 4 or 5 at the time, and she was like, well, maybe they just need a lot of buckets. So she was trying to wrap her mind around it. So she does know about it, and I've been explaining it slowly to her, and she's still sort of wrapping her mind around it as an issue. And she's like, I don't see any changes outside. Why? What do you mean the sea level is rising? You know, she's like, you know, I'm like, you can't see it necessarily, but it's actually happening. So that's how I usually explain it to her. You know. Any other questions? Do you have one? Okay. Yeah. Mm. Oh, my favorite. I think I missed the second one, but the first one I was going to say was I really enjoyed. I didn't realize Islanders could be writers until I went into my English teacher's office and I saw a collection of writing from the Pacific Islands called Nua Nua. Albert Wendt was the one who helped edit it, who's a really famous and prolific Samoan author. And I was immediately like, Pacific Islanders can be writers? Because all the way up to that point, I only read Asian authors, European authors, American authors, but I had no idea that we could be writers. So that was like a huge deal for me to see that. And then, so that was one. Definitely Albert Wendt. I read all of his novels when I was younger. And then I read Laura Ingalls Wilder when I was a kid. I was really into Laura Ingalls Wilder. But I have a poem about her because there was some problematic issues with her books. Yeah, so I called it out later. And then I guess, but now that I'm older, I really like Craig Santos Perez as a poet, No'u Revilla, and Ocean Vuong. I'm really inspired by the craft of Ocean Vuong. So, and that's the work that I'm reading right now. What was the other question? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Mm. Mm. That's true. That's true. Yeah, I guess there are angry parts. I forgot about that. Uh, mm. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah, I get asked that a lot. It's kind of hard because it's such a big and complex issue, and it's easy for people to give up hope. So I guess one thing is to not give up entirely. I think people fall into this camp of nihilism where it's just like it's too late. There's nothing we can do, and that's not necessarily true. So I think not giving up hope is pretty important. If I can keep my hope up, then come on, man. I'm pretty sure you guys can. So yeah, that's part of it is like making sure that people don't give up on the cause and continue to put pressure on their local governments and their governments to, and you know, joining kind of these worldwide movements because people power does work from what I've seen. It has changed ideas and perceptions. So I think it's joining that movement is important and joining the causes that exist and supporting those. So those are kind of the, you know, what I tend to focus on. I think individual actions are important too, but I think it's really the collective that's the most important. Yeah. So I guess that's I hope that answers it, but that's how I usually, yeah, I think usually it's about like continuing to put pressure, believing in it as an issue, not like forgetting it as an issue, not giving up, and then joining the local causes and putting pressure on your governments to make the changes, like joining those campaigning organizations that are already doing that. I would encourage people to do that. Yeah, that are already doing that work and knowing the avenues to do that. Yeah. I hope that makes sense. I don't know. You could also donate to our nonprofit. Full disclosure. Yeah. So, yeah. Anything else? Any other questions?
Here you go. Sorry.
I'm not good at microphones. But it helps when I don't yell, so sorry. Anyway, thank you for being here. The question was the juxtaposition of fossil-free fuel, the RMI's atomic legacy, nuclear power possibly being a carbon-free power source that could solve climate change. Have you given any thought or consideration to that? And if so, what are your thoughts?
To nuclear energy and nuclear energy, or you're saying the nuclear legacy and the intersections with climate change, or?
Yes, exactly. Kind of that strange intersection that the RMI has with nuclear power. Exactly.
Well, I think that's what makes RMI really an important we have an important position globally to share this kind of intersections. We have this really unique history of trauma that informs how we respond to the incoming climate disaster that's coming. Like, we have already lost lands. We know the pain of lost lands. We can't lose any more to this rising sea level. So we already know what it is to be displaced. We know how it affects our culture and our manit. And so that's informing how we plan and strategize, moving ahead. And I can explain that in a really practical way. In the National Adaptation Plan that we're developing, we're going to be prioritizing getting perspectives from nuclear communities, from the 4 atoll communities, to give us perspectives on how, what their thoughts are on planning for adaptation, relocation, all of those, and how that informs, and their perspectives are going to feed into how we form the NAP. And then there's also the interesting solution of there's kind of growing movement for nuclear energy. I think what I'm hoping to do is we need to take a stance against nuclear energy as a solution for climate change, because I don't agree with it personally, and with our nuclear legacy as a background, I don't think it's a clean way of dealing with. It's a false solution. And yet there's a movement it includes youth. We just saw youth, who did a flash mob at the last COP for nuclear energy. And so, I think that's an opportunity for RMI to take a stance on that too. So what we have is something we call a moral authority. And if we continue to cultivate that, then that can help us at least, use our stance in these negotiations to push on these issues in some form. But really, the nuclear legacy is long overdue, and that's an ongoing issue that still needs to be resolved. So, yeah. So those are kind of the different intersections. The Runit Dome also is a really good symbol for that intersection between the two issues. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And this sort of changes the direction of of the questions, but I think that the videos on YouTube that are produced, that along with your poems, are really, really powerful. And so my question is, how involved are you in that storytelling through videos and the footage? And then can you talk a little bit about the collaboration of
for the videos that we created?
Yeah,
sure.
because they're really great.
Yeah, so me and Dan talked about it afterwards, and it looks like I collaborated with my friend Dan Lin, and he liked my work and was like, I really want to help you support your vision of going to the Dome and performing from the Dome. Because I had met him maybe 2-3 years before I did that video, and he was like, if you could do anything, any video project, what would you want to do? And I said, I want to go visit the Dome. I want to be on the Dome and do a poem from the Dome. I think it could be really cool. And then he got the funding and was able to help and find editors for us to work with. And I basically kind of came up with the storyline, and he helped and gave him some of the visuals that I wanted behind the piece and wrote the poem. And then he kind of added on to that and did the shooting. And then we brought it to an editor, and that's how we brought it all together. So it was really kind of an idea, like, because before all my other poem videos is just me performing, and I was like, it's got to be the poem and that's it. But with those two, I invested a little bit more time in the story and in telling, in using the visuals to add depth to the piece. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know how long it's been, but I feel like I've been talking for a minute. I can stop. So, yeah. Well, so thank you all so much, and I'll let you take it over. Okay.
Thank you for talking so long. So is it the nonprofit that we could donate to? That's Joe Jickum, right? Okay. They have a website and a PayPal, so maybe I'll put that information out for people to see, because that's like a concrete way. She's going to talk to the high schoolers, and they actually, for the past 3 summers, this will be the 4th summer they're doing it, they have like an arts and climate and health, it's with the Ministry of Health, and then kind of this, it's like a climate and health arts camp. And so, like, that's when I mentioned that we've had a student from here go to before. And then, so there's scholarships, and then they can do 2 from Kwajalein Atoll, so Ebi or Kwajalein or Third Island or wherever. So if you wanted to donate, that would help actually support students, like, learning how to, and she said this year, I think you guys are incorporating digital storytelling into it's like weaving and painting and other things as well. So it's a really cool cause if anybody wants to donate to that. So. Okay, so first of all, thank you to Kathy for coming in and sharing her art and her stories with us. And then I also wanted to thank the people who were and the organizations to help bring her to Island. So I guess I should thank all the Kwaj community for going to Spartan Espresso and buying coffees and muffins when they have them, because they did help provide some of the funding to get Kathy here. Thanks to the Kwajalein school system for helping with the organizing, and then the Sakayo and Gerber families for also contributing towards like the plane ticket and the lodging and all that stuff. So that's who I want to thank, and thank you guys for coming. Oh, and Mr. Vester, sorry, I forgot one too. Sorry, Mr. Vester. But yes, thank you all for coming out on a Wednesday night.